Sancy Horman Stewart. I'm a senior this year at SUU. My degree is in agriculture science with an emphasis in rangeland management and natural resource. For my presentation today, I'm actually going to be doing it from my own research project that I've done for my capstone class as I'm about ready to graduate. So my project and presentation is on the Valley Farm pasture improvement. Valley Farm is actually based here in Cedar City. It's out west of town. This operation has cattle, sheep, horses. It's basically kind of your definition of a farm. They also raise alfalfa crops and sell them when they're harvested. They have one field in specific that has been my target. This one has not been used for a long time, and they have a plan of wanting to use it for a rangeland to graze their cattle on, specifically in the late fall, early winter time, so as they're not having to spend even more money feeding their cattle when the land that they're on can provide that for them. So this map right here actually shows the entire farm's property, and then this map right here outlines the pasture that I'm going to be focusing on. And this pasture is 163 acres. So before this pasture was used for grazing, this site was dominated with what we call cool season grasses. Cool season grasses are grasses that grow in cooler climates and in cooler seasons. So, many of you have probably heard of cheatgrass. That's a very obnoxious plant that greens up and grows in the springtime and then again in the fall when the temperatures drop and the moisture and precipitation amount increase. So this area right here had a lot of cool season grasses. A lot of it was actually native and really desirable for cattle. And so when the farm manager decided to actually use this area for cattle grazing, he let the cattle out. The cattle did really well on it for the first little while, but then the plants started not being able to reproduce and come back and replenish after being grazed on. And so those cool season desirable grasses that we want have died off. And in replacement, a bunch of weeds and undesirable grasses and shrubs and forbs that cattle just cannot eat and they don't want to eat have come in and taken over. So the specific goals that I have come up with for the Valley Farm pasture is to first off improve the grazing quality. That is our main goal here. We want to be able to have the cattle live off of the land instead of having the managers and the farm owners and whatnot having to pay extra in order for their animals to survive. The other thing we want to do is have a higher percentage of perennial and desired grasses. So perennial, for those of you who don't know, those are grasses that come back year-round, and they do not need to be replanted. So tulips is an awesome example of that, actually. So the other goal that I have is to improve the amount of forage for the late fall and early winter grazing. Yes, we do get some forage on there or available grasses for the cattle to eat, but it's not enough to actually sustain the whole herd's needs. So for the problem analysis section, there was a lot of problems coming into this field. The first thing I noticed is that there's a lot of invasive plant species. They've taken over and have choked out all of the species that we want there. A really popular one that we've actually seen across town is rabbit brush, sagebrush, and cheatgrass. All of these were found very prominently in the pasture. And so, like I had mentioned before, these types of plants do not supply the cattle with the nutrition that they need. Rubber rabbit brush and sagebrush specifically, those shrubs, nothing really can eat those to survive off of those, especially cows, because those are grazers. They specifically eat grasses, and that's what their body's used to ingesting and getting the nutrients out of. Cheatgrass, on the other hand, like I had mentioned before, it can green up and animals can eat it, but it has a very short window of opportunity to do that. And really green, wet grass does not provide the nutrients that an animal actually needs. And so, yes, cheatgrass can grow on the land, and yes, we can get some use out of it, but it's definitely not enough to support the herd. So in my research, there was 3 different types of methods that I used when going out and taking in all the data and collecting everything. So this was all done in the fall, late fall, in about a 2-month period, specifically September and October. This time of year, we've had our monsoonal rains, and so we should see a small amount of green up in grasses, but unfortunately with this year being more of a drought year in the fall and not getting those monsoonal rains, we did see a decrease in greened up grass. So the first method I used was actually the step point method. And this method, all you do is you pick a landmark and you walk towards that landmark. And every 5 to 10 steps, for me, I chose 10, I would drop what we call, it's a pin, basically, just a long skinny metal rod. So after every 10 steps, you would drop the pin at the top of your foot, and whatever it landed on, you would record. So what I recorded was, majority of what it had landed on was cheatgrass, sagebrush, and rubber rabbit brush. And as you can see, those aren't desirable. The next method I did, which is a couple weeks later, was the gap intercept method. This one specifically measured how much vegetation was out there. So what I did is I ran a 100-meter tape across a section of the pasture, and at every 5 meters I would drop that same pin and I would record the data that was collected from that. And then the second part to this was that you would measure how big the canopy is and how big the gap is between the canopies of the plants. And so after doing that, the results were pretty conclusive in the fact that only 84% of that area was completely covered just in bare ground. There was not a lot of vegetation being grown. And finally, the last method I did, which was a group effort with a couple other of my classmates, was the modified Whitaker approach. I don't know if you guys can see it on the screen super well from this distance, but basically you set up a 20 by 60 meter box on just some random part of the land that you pick out in this pasture, and then you make even smaller boxes in the corners, and then a smaller box in the middle. And what you do is you start in the small boxes in the corners and you record every single plant that you have seen in this box, and then you just move all the way around. If you've already recorded that plant, then you don't write it down again. And you do that for every single box in the main box. And those results were pretty significant and had a really big impact on the fact that there is not a lot of stuff growing out there that can be digested and eaten by animals there. So the equipment that I have suggested for the farm to use is called the Lawson aerator and seeder. This piece of machinery has actually been in a couple other research projects and studies to improve rangelands. So I'm just going to show you guys a quick video of how this actually works. So, oh, sorry, don't know why that popped up. So as you can see, there's these 2 giant rollers that have spikes coming out of them. And what this farmer here is doing is just taking his tractor and just plowing things down. As you can see, he plowed over a tree that was in his way to improve the rangeland and farmland that he was preparing this ground for, and then he runs back over it. So this specific piece of equipment here is actually really awesome when it comes to preparing rangeland for reseeding and for revegetation, because as the machinery goes over the land and breaks up the plants that are not desirable, it actually breaks the ground up and provides a seed bed, and those dead plants that are there now actually provide cover for the plants, so other animals and Mother Nature itself can't take those seeds away. Excuse me. So finally, we've reached the cost analysis in this presentation, and the Lawson aerator in Cedar actually has a pretty good package deal to where you get the machinery and the gas for the tractor that you're going to be using all combined into a $30 per acre package, which is actually really good. So the pasture land and seed mix that I chose to use included a lot of our native grasses that we want and the cool season grasses that we want for our cattle to be on. So I actually chose this from the Great Basin Seed Company, which is based in Colorado, and they excuse me, offered a $3.85 per pound deal for us. So, and they have a recommended seeding rate, which is how many seeds you apply per acre. And so we would do 16 pounds of seed per every acre that we wanted to redo. So with both the aerator and the seed mix, it will cost $91.60 per acre. And again, our recommendations for the pasture improvement is 163 acres. So I took the 163 and multiplied it by 91.60, and it came out to $14,930.80. So, which seems like a lot, but in the long run, will save a lot of money in the end. So just in conclusion, in order to achieve a very healthy pasture land again, that we need to actually provide a period of non-use for 4 to 5 years. So since that land isn't actually being used right now, that won't be an issue for the farmer and farm managers because they've already been using other pastures for their cattle. So that won't be too much of an issue. But the next thing is that you need to use a conservative grazing approach for 10 years to follow that. That was the recommendation with the seed company and other people who have done similar projects like this. So then by following these recommendations, you'll get the best outcome for your field. So yeah, thank you so much.